Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Hello, everybody. I'm here today with Vince Palko talking about building your legacy. Vince is somebody that I met at ClickFunnels. ClickFunnels is a wonderful digital marketing company that has taught me virtually everything I know about digital marketing. And Vince was fascinating. He had an exhibition within it, but was also called out during the conference because he had done some really unique things that the owner and the leader of the ClickFunnels group had used. And I looked at that and I was fascinated because I'm very much in tune to, is it the right brain, the left brain? How do we use the whole brain together? And I could see how Vince was using this to really trigger our ability to use the full brain. And so I'm going to just pause there right now, let Vince introduce himself, tell his story as to how he got started, and then we'll talk a little bit about what is it that Vince does with AdTunes and what can it do for us as we develop our careers and also our legacy. So Vince, it's yours.
Well, I want to first start and thank you so much for allowing me to be on with you and share with your amazing audience kind of what we do here and what we're all about and kind of our different twists on things. And I love that intro. You know, it really is blending the right with the left brain because everyone gathers information differently. And, you know, we feel that the learning sticks easier when you add that right brain, that visual element. And we've got data upon data that, you know, speaks to that in marketing, in education for employees, and just in general when you're kind of working one-on-one with people. So again, thanks so much for being on, and fire away with the first question or what you would like to know.
What I'd like everybody to know is, how do you get started doing AdTunes, cartoons, drawings to really trigger that message? But what got you moving in that direction? It's so amazingly unusual.
It's a great question. A question that a lot of people ask me. I remember being as a student athlete at Bowling Green State University, the big football star, and all the media would want to know, well, you're an artist and a football player. I just don't get this. But if we're to go way, way back, I had a mother as an art teacher and who taught me everything I know. And I had a father in sales. He was doing HVAC sales and different elements in that niche. So they created this hybrid of someone who is really engaged with art. But then my dad would take me on these sales calls when I was in college, and I would sit in on their lunches, and he probably had me there to brag about it as my son who plays football. But I was a student of both of those environments and themes. Being a student of the game with art, being a student watching, observing my father, and it wasn't pushy sales. It was just developing relationships. And when I look back, and then see where I've come, they both have influenced me tremendously. So they created this hybrid kid who, loves sales, loves art, and loves design, loves cartoons. And so I was working with a company probably in 1998 that specialized in visual learning for companies. And they would hire these artists to draw these amazing visual races of cars and boats and things of that nature. And so I worked there for a few years and then thought to myself, I have my own message and I want to share and help people with some of my ideas. And so I struck out on my own and went And I had a mentor at the time named Matt Fury, and he and I teamed up to create what is the very first cartoon ad since the Charles Atlas ads. And if your audience might be familiar with that, that's, I think, how, guy's on the beach, he's getting sand kicked in his face, and he's a wimpy guy, and he comes back and he uses the Charles Atlas system to get stronger, and he gets humiliated in front of his girlfriend on the beach, but then he comes back and defeats, the guy picking on him. And that was, I don't know, 40s or 50s. So they say what's new is old and what's old is new again. We just brought that back out in a comic book strip, and it lifted his business. He was a self-publisher, speaker, and the main idea, the main intent of that, behind all that, is just to be different, right? To go against the grain of what most people are doing traditionally, to stand out and to kind of build your following. And so that's kind of where I started. Business was great for a while, and then business tanked. And this was like around 2008, 2009. And it went through a really challenging period of my life where I was going through a divorce. I had all these kids. I'm trying to kind of build this business, and the business is failing. And I've got the weight of the world on my back, and I don't know what to do. And I'm an idea guy, and I'm down to my last idea. And essentially, I went to a client who I had done work with before to build just cartoon headers on the top of websites and things of that nature. I said, Mike, we can visualize your whole 15-minute sales presentation. He's like, what are you talking about? Like cartoons in a PowerPoint? I'm like, no, we can draw out every scene. And in that very first, and so he's like, no, and it took like a month to go back and forth with him. And basically at the end of that, he said, okay, I'll give you some money on the upfront to develop it. And it won't be what you're asking for, Vince, but if you beat my control, he had an A-B split test. So the A test, or the A control, was PowerPoint presentation with narration, just text sliding in and out, and versus the ad tune. He said, if you beat my control by 10%, I'll give you a large chunk of change. If you beat it by 20, I'll double it.
Wow. So, that's motivating.
Yeah. And since I really didn't have much to go on, I took it and I said, let's go. And within a week, I had this 15-minute ad tune created, and he put it up, and he didn't see a 10% increase. He didn't see a 20% increase. Lois, what do you think the increase was?
Oh, wow. Okay. When you ask it that way, I'm guessing maybe 60%.
It's a good guess. And Mike would have been happy as a clam, because in his world, he's driving millions of eyeballs to this thing. He just moves the needle a little bit, and he's loving life. So, but the actual split test result was 85% over his control, that the ad tune beat.
Oh, wow.
PowerPoint presentation with narration. Same presentation, apples to apples. Same audio file put into an ad tune creation. And so there's a lot of debate out there on who started this whiteboard craze, and essentially that is what kicked it all off. And no one was getting the results we were getting in terms of the response from people. And so a little bit more to the story, he did some tweaking and testing to it, and he saw another 268% bump. So we 353% increased his sales presentation, and the guy was making $1 million a month, and we tripled it just selling a $47 PDF. So that's how AdTunes started. And after that, I started paying off bills, and life got a little easier. And then it was, just I could name whatever price I wanted to, in terms of what we do. So, but really, it's all around creating a message that can kind of, like you said in the beginning, aligns the left brain and the right brain. The drawing keeps people's attention so that you can deliver a marketing message and allow for that message to come through without someone saying, don't sell to me, Vince, I don't want to be sold to. It's just a playful, fun cartoon. And you'd be amazed. So many people are like, well, Vince, my business is too serious.
Yeah.
It's not going to work for me. But we have a lot of affluent clients that are in financial services, insurance, technology, that understand the power of laying out a visual value proposition so that you can take a 40-minute conversation, boil it down into 3 minutes, and make it extremely effective for sharing within a company and things of that nature.
Right. Vince, I want to go back to what you were saying just a few minutes ago with what you developed with a visual for one of your companies. And it's something that you've shared with me in terms of how to communicate. And one of the things that I have realized when I work with global companies, for example, that is that language is a limiting component, because everybody tries to use English. That's sort of our staple datum in terms of language. The problem is some of us will have learned English in England or Australia or even in different regions of the U.S. And so our use of words varies. And what people go away from meetings sometimes differs in terms of their understanding. And so part of what I love about what you've done with graphics is it hits a part of the brain that kind of fills in those gaps of understanding. So if you would just share a little bit with people what it is that you've done, because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, so I think this is a good point to kind of pull up my whiteboard and to speak to what you just shared there. If you think of the word bear, right? To you, an image might come up in your head about what that word means.
Right.
To me, another image might come up on what that means. To my, if I've got a niece who's 2 years old, that's a completely different image. That might be an image like this. Right?
Yes.
And so, to your point, visuals, to me, it might be, a black bear, that's running through the woods. And now, is that a black bear? Is it a polar bear? And there's all kinds of different meanings to that word. But when you draw a visual, and let's draw a visual, everyone knows what this is, right? It's a teddy bear. And so the beautiful part about the visual language that supports the written word is we've had clients from all over the world and translated to many different languages. And the foundation is kind of that visual canvas that we can share the message, and then they just drop in different languages. But the visual doesn't have to change because the visual is universal. And I don't know when words were created and how language was developed. I don't know, go back 1,000 years or whatever that might be. But then you think about, well, when was the visual introduced? We can go back past ancient hieroglyphics,
yes,
go to cave paintings. 50,000 years ago, okay? They're drawing in caves little, icons and arrows of, hey, this is how we hunt bear. We go down here, we have spear, and we, chase bear. And so that's the fascinating thing, is that visuals have been around forever. But very interesting question and very interesting point. I hope I answered that. And how we do that in marketing is, obviously, well, we develop the script, we develop that story, we develop whatever message we're trying to convey, and then we have very talented artists that go in and just read the paragraph and illustrate it.
So can I just interrupt you there for a moment? Because I think when I first started looking at working with you and developing a comic to tell our story about team performance, how do you create team performance? What makes me hesitant, or I think a person hesitant, is it seems overwhelming. Where do you start in this process? And the beautiful part was, all I had to do was to explain to you what I wanted or needed, the basic idea, the basic concepts, and you were able to take it from there. So would you explain to people what that process is? Because it was so simple, from my perspective, so simple.
Well, thank you. Yes. So essentially, we start with a questionnaire that we send to our client to kind of get in line, kind of the story and the target audience we want to, go after. No one knows your business better than you. And then what I like to say in a very humbling way, no one knows how to put one of these things better than we do, because we've been doing it forever. Mm-hmm. And so it's really that combination working together to get the nugget of the kernel of the idea of what we want to get across. And then it's, let's have fun, brainstorm what that story could be. So we all hop on a call. We call them kickoff copy calls. And this can be for a whiteboard animation. It can be for a business comic. It's pretty much the same. And we talk and have fun and say, we could have this character, we could develop that. And, from there, we let the writer go away and craft the script and tell the story. And then essentially we send that story to the client for approval. And they have changes and polishes that they want to make. And we make those. We don't start anything until, each milestone is really dialed in and the client's loving it. And then from there, we'll go and we'll hand that script off to our talented Disney level, I like to call, artists that then take that message and visually begin building characters, begin building settings, begin building the villains and whatnot. And then we go back and we lay the script into a storyboard format, send it back to the client, and then have them approve that. Once we have that approved, then we start inking, final ink of the storyboard. Or, if we're building out a video for a whiteboard, we then take that and illustrate it in an actual, with a camera above, the artist below, drawing out every scene. And then we take that back to the computer, merge it up with the audio file from our voice talent, and create a video, or continue building the comic and coloring that in, and adding graphics and things of that nature. And then we put that into a format, a layout, and essentially get that to our client. Now, in your case, we did both. We built a comic, and then we created
a Marvel type of comic. It was fabulous. Mike, the little ones in my life love it.
and thank you. And then from there, we built out that really fun, engaging video that told that story, brought it to life. I even have a cameo in there for one of the voices. So that's kind of the whole process from soup to nuts, as we say. And then we send it to our client, and they either hand it off to their webmaster or other people that are helping them with their marketing. So yeah, that's the process in a nutshell.
So Vince, what do you find, when is it that people tend to use something like this that's creative? I think we're still so much boxed into the traditional way of using words and communicating that way. What is it that drives people to begin to look at this other modality?
Yeah, great question. So, for us, we've seen in our experience with working with folks is kind of the more complex the message that needs to be shared, we're all over that, because we can take a complex message, boil it down to its essence, simplify it so the average Joe, Jane, and everyone else can get an understanding for what it is the business is trying to communicate. And we've done e-learning applications now, so we're getting more into that as well, because you think of traditional e-learning, and it's just PowerPoint, boring PowerPoint presentations that put you to sleep. And these ad tunes, you can fold them into an e-learning application that really tells a story, engages the viewer, the learner. So there's all kinds of different ways to kind of take that methodology, if you will, and put it into different applications to get extreme benefit for. But for the most part, it's taking a complex message that literally, I mean, we'll be on the phone with clients for an hour at times, and we can, get that boiled down into a 2 to 2.5 minute video that, is easily shareable if you want to sell it up the chain in a business, is delivering a clear, consistent message every time. If let's say you have a sales force and you have some junior folks in there, they're maybe not getting the sales message right every time, but this, is doing that for your company, and it's on the internet 24/7, 365 while you sleep and hang out with your family and do your own thing.
So Vince, if somebody decides to do something like this, lead time, about how long does it take?
Yep. So depending on the application, if we're doing whiteboard video, it's 3 to 4 weeks. If it's building out a comic, then animating it, the comic usually takes 4 to 5 weeks, and then another 3 to 4 weeks to develop that into a video. So
not so long.
Not long at all. And, most people are like, oh, that's all it takes. I thought it'd take like 3 months. And there's some bigger companies that have to, shop it around internally more. That can fluctuate. But, if we're getting fast feedback along the way, we can knock it out.
What do you love most about what you do?
What do I love most? I love the ability to take my passion and use it as my profession, and to really help businesses communicate their messages and complex messages that maybe people don't really grasp or have to keep repeating, and just be a part of that process. But, there's two camps out there, right? One is you can follow your passion and make it your profession. And there's others that believe that you can't, that you have to go kind of find a hungry market, give them what they want. And, I love that about what we've done here at AdTunes, and super talented team behind me, but we were the pioneers in the beginning. Like, that's why I wrote the book, The Art of Selling Using Cartoons, is I had to educate people on why you'd want to use a silly cartoon in your marketing and in your communications. And now, there's several other competitors out there, which I love, because you always have to adjust and navigate the waters. But it's really being able to take my first love. Like, I grew up loving sports and loving art, and here I am after all these years still doing art and design. And so that's really, really what I enjoy about this. And the business is small enough where I can stamp every project that comes over my desk. I could have taken it and made it a big sweatshop, but I really love just being tied to every project to make sure it's getting my seal of approval that I have and had since 2005 when I started. So.
You've also started doing something a little bit new with coaching, your drawing coaching programs. You want to talk a little bit about that and what that involves?
Sure. So this is an interesting thing. When I look back on the progression, the timeline of AdTunes, before I was doing AdTunes, I was coaching people, doctors, web guys, lawyers, who had an interest in drawing, to then develop just real simple graphics, and then we developed those into AdTunes. And then after that, I was like, I could be doing this myself and doing it professionally. And it's kind of circled back around. We had a Doodle Palooza day here at AdTunes. We brought in 10 little kids, from 7 to 14, and we showed them, you can make a living doing what you love. And so we had them doodling and things of that nature. And I've also started Creative Genius Academy with my mentor, Matt Fury. And it's a 30-day program where we'll teach you how to kind of draw, doodle, and get more comfortable with that, because one thing I noticed when I'm selling technology, when I'm communicating with people what I do, it would go over their heads a lot. And when I would, go to make the final close, they would say, okay, now, what am I getting again? and I have to go back through the whole thing, the whole presentation. But I found that if I do this, if I create, and Lois will know this as the stack, but as soon as I started doing, okay, you'll get a 2.5-minute video. Tied to that, you'll also get a 50-second highlight trailer, same content, just shorter. And then if we'll also take that script and build out a ebook that is a 10 to 14-page ebook. By the way, after every completed scene is done, we'll take screen caps of that so you can use that on social media. And Lois, as soon as I started doing this, people got it. And I'm not drawing anything fancy, but I'm laying out exactly what I'm giving them. And the close got super easy. I don't know the data on it, but this is what I use now, in my sales presentations. And so, so when you think of business, when you think of communicating, and if you're in the camp of you're always selling someone or persuading someone to adapt an idea, the visual is so huge. And most people have this idea, well, Vince, I can't even draw a straight line. And I spoke, Lois, to my middle daughter's kindergarten class about, 10 years or 12 years ago. And I said, who in this room is an artist? And before I said teased an artist, every hand shot up, Lois. And if you were to come back a few years later, there'd be less in the class holding their hand up. Come back a few years later after that, probably one or two raise their hand. Why is that? It's because someone told them along the way you're not good enough. Or maybe I compared myself to Sally over here, and Sally's so good, I stink as an artist. But the reality is we're all born creative souls that know how to draw, know how to get in finger paint, know how to spread mashed potatoes around and make little designs in there. And so the idea with this is to help business owners, just people in business, be able to communicate a lot more effectively with drawing and doodling and sharing with people. Because when I know when I pick up a pen and I start drawing, there's something about the people in the room, just like online, and that's why we have hand drawing in most of our videos, because it's super relaxing. They want to see what's going to be drawn. They want to see what's coming next. And I know I can hold an audience's attention by just drawing simple things. So if I'm talking real slow, and here you're here, but you want to go here, I can hold their attention and I can keep them engaged just with the simple shapes and the presentation of laying everything out visually for them. So that spurred the idea to develop this program. And that's the other thing that we do is, it's the Creative Genius Academy. It's cgaclub.com. It's still in formation, but we've created all the videos and we're going to be launching soon. So yeah, that's the other thing that we're in the process of helping businesses with.
You know what? It's so fascinating to hear about this because I think one of the, you look at neuro-linguistic programming, for example, and one of the things that they talk about is our mediums in which we take in information, touch, feeling, hearing. And the nice thing about, I think, what's visual is it brings in those sensory aspects that we tend to push aside, especially as we become more and more professionals, because we've been taught that that's not where you go as professionals. And yet, when I hand people the comic that you did, it always brings a chuckle, right? It's like, really? And then they take a look at it.
Sure. Yeah, we've had, we've got another client that has used the comic they send it out, and he's marketing to doctors. And you would think, like, how in the heck is a doctor going to go through this? But it does two things, right? It grabs their attention. Let's say the gatekeeper gets it, and they're not going to throw it out like they're going to throw out a brochure or a pamphlet. They're going to look at it and be like, "Hey, you check this out." And so it gets up past the gatekeeper, and it delivers a message that is engaging and fun and thorough. So he's used that to build his coaching practice and build his digital agency for doctors, if you will, that promotes his software. So it's when you think it won't work for something you're working on, think again. You got to give it a try and see. Every market's different, but they're a powerful way to connect with individuals.
So you know what, Vince, it's hard to believe we've been talking for almost half an hour. And so I just want to reiterate a couple of things that we've talked about that I think is so really important. And one is that to really get our message out today, there's so much clutter. We have to do it in interesting and different ways. And we also have to engage that right brain, because people don't have the opportunity to do that very much. And that's one of the things that I really love about you and what you do. And so thoughts that you have, things that you want to leave with our audience that you want them to think about.
Yeah, in our world, they say, people buy an emotion, they back it with logic. Well, guess what? The left brain is the logical side. And if you're not integrating the visionary side of what can be for your audience, that's the right brain. And if you're not doing that, you're missing an important element. But the biggest thing is, it's challenging in the corporate world to dare to be different. But when you look at these companies that are going outside the comfort zone or going outside the box, I mean, you look at Geico and what they've done with insurance. They've created this little cartoon character that is hilarious.
Yeah.
And not just that, but every commercial they have, and I hear a radio spot, and it's really well done. It's done by Geico, and so you really have to get outside, think outside the box. I know it's trite, but it's scary at times in the corporate world. But always be testing different things to see which works with your audience. You never know. And your husband, your wife, they can give you good feedback, friends, but it's in the end the marketplace that's going to dictate how well an application, a campaign, or something that works. Not what I think, not what you think, not what the neighbor thinks. And that's what I love about this, is that we can continually put out different things to test and tweak and hone to see how well the marketplace is responding.
Well, you have done an incredible job. Thank you. I appreciate your time so much, Vince. Thank you for being here and for sharing your thoughts with our audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And look forward to continuing the journey, continuing the relationship.
I want to end here. We'll clip it here, because here's where we'll end the podcast. And as we were talking, I realized how podcasts are more auditory. We'll also put this on YouTube. And so if you don't mind just holding on for a few extra moments, maybe another 10 minutes, what I'd like to do is to splice in a piece for YouTube and what you've done with advertising, looking at the pharmaceutical and some of the drawing. I didn't, as we were talking, I thought we can't get into it because if they're listening, they can't see. So, but on YouTube they can. So if you'd like to talk about that, I'd love to make that opportunity for you.
Yeah. Do you also splice in a way to have them reach me or contact me?
No, we'll just splice it in. We'll do it right now.
Okay. Perfect.
We got all set up, so it's just as easy to do it now.
Perfect.
Ready?
Yep.
So I'll start with the question, and then you can go from there.
Okay.
So Vince, one of the things that you have shared, and you've shown me, because I'm always looking at ways that I can explain to people what I do. I have so many moving parts with what I do. And you've done some fascinating work explaining for companies that have moving parts, many moving parts, to help get their message out. Would you share some of that, please?
Sure. So one of the companies that I was a part of way back in my early development was a company that developed learning tools for Fortune 500 companies. And it wasn't until recently that we started getting back into that niche as well. But doing it in a way where we're focused on the healthcare audience. And we did a lot of work with Florida Hospital, Hartford Healthcare, Brigham in
Utah.
Brigham Women's Health. I think that's on the East Coast as well.
Massachusetts, I believe, isn't it? Yeah.
And so there's all this focus around the patient experience and because reimbursements now are dependent on how well a hospital's doing. If your scores are poor, they're really not going to reimburse you like they did before. And so it's really good in that, they're rewarding hospitals based on how well they're doing.
Right.
So we teamed up with Press Ganey. If you're in the healthcare field, you understand who Press Ganey is. They develop these surveys. So if I won't say me, if my neighbor breaks his arm and goes to the hospital, comes back in a few days, he'll receive a survey. How well was the care? How clean was the facility? And he'll fill that out and send it in.
Right.
And essentially, they didn't have, Press Ganey would get all this data back, but not, tell a hospital you're 20% to goal. And the hospital will come back and say, well, okay, great. Now what? And so Press Ganey, until they met me and our company, Visual Guides, Inc., they didn't have a way to improve those scores. So we developed these learning tools called Visual Guides, and essentially it walks learners from a hospital, from a big company, through a process where there's dialogue questions asked, there's a facilitator, there's little card decks that convey information of why we need to change our focus to be more patient-focused and focus on the experience of the patient. And so this was done.
Just to be clear, this is information for the hospital to use with their employees.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Internal applications. And this is a real simplified version of this that we did for Astellas, which was a pharmaceutical company. And you may think, what do they care about the patient experience? Everyone's going there, and they're cutting edge, putting this system, this program together to even get their pharmaceutical company thinking of the patient. So if you start in the lower left, everyone is siloed and everyone's doing their own job. And well, how do I impact patient experience? I'm in accounting. And essentially, through the conversation, through the dialogue, we all get on one ship, going in the same direction. We have the strategy, which is making a difference for patients in the three areas they want to focus on there, kind of driving them to this future state. And then we've got barriers and obstacles that they have to face. Well, I don't have any time. I'm not given enough staff. And so they talk about those things with 8 to 10 people around a table, sharing experiences. And it's through that shared learning that they get aha moments going off saying, okay, we want to be on the leading edge. We want to have everyone focused on the patient. And so that leads them to this future world, and where, we're working with hospitals, we're working with patients, payers, and all these different people are our clients. And we want to be, essentially working with them in a way that helps their lives and their business. So, in a nutshell, that's the methodology behind, again, using a visual to create, to communicate and to drive learning. And that's the Visual Guide Inc. Business that we also have here as well.
So Vince, what's been the response rate? How did the needle get moved for the hospital as a result of this process?
That's a great question. And, it's more anecdotal in terms of, when you think of this visual learning, there's data that I can develop. It was first done at Cleveland Clinic, and I can supply data. I can't find it right now, but the needle did move once they rolled this out. What I can speak to is when we worked with Florida Hospital, the CEO, he said just from walking around within the first month, he could see a change in, service behaviors, which was, people putting their cell phones down in the hallway as they're walking down the hall, actually greeting people, letting patient families go in front of them in these elevators instead of them going up there because they're late for a meeting or something to that effect. And he saw immediate change within that first month of rolling out this to all their employees in the hospital system. So it's super, super fun to be a part of and create, and to be a part of like letting our artwork help serve patients. I mean, that's another wonderful thing that, an outcome for us that we really, really are passionate about is helping patients and improve their experience.
So Vince, when you have something like this, hospitals are very complex organizations. They've got so many different leaders in a sense and constituencies. How did you go about, what was the process that you used in developing this to get the appropriate constituencies involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we created 4 design sessions over the course of 3 months where we'd meet with the leadership team. We'd get different people from different areas of the hospital. Obviously, the CEO has to be bought into it, and as this is a practice that they want to roll out and be 100% bought into, because if we don't have that kind of support, it's never going to go anywhere. But essentially, start one design session where more of the business developers meet. We bring in an artist to kind of hear the whole story and start roughing out images. Is this your future state? Is this kind of what you would like to have? Because this is just one metaphor. Usually the patient's in the middle, and with all these different elements going on around the visual. And as an artist, you have to incorporate that all in. And then we just start testing it. We start getting, groups, nurses, physicians, people that, are in cleaning. And essentially we just start testing with different people from different areas and units. And we sit them around the table and walk them through a test. And some information resonates, some doesn't. And so we race out different parts, change it. And so it's very iterative over 3 months. Then we go to the next design session, fill the group in on what happened in that first test, make any modifications, still gathering data at that point to really bring the thing together. And then over the course of 3 months, at the end of that, we'll do a train the trainer, and then they're essentially on their own to roll it out. But it's very time consuming and but worth it in the end when you get everyone on the same page.
It's fascinating to me, and your ability to in 1 month have people begin to change behavior, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Especially in hospitals where you have so many people. So I think that you've really discovered something here that could be incredibly useful, but it's great for organizations, large organizations, because communication is fundamentally difficult. And if it's global, it's even more difficult because you have culture and language as an additional component. Yes,
without a doubt. And I was trying to pull up another sample, and I don't know if this one has it, but essentially, there's data points that share with the audience, the learners around the table, why people choose us. Why do they choose the ED, emergency department? Why do they choose this area? And we'll lay down cards to show them, is it cleanliness? Is it physicians? Is it, and 9 times out of 10, they'll get it wrong. And so they throw their assumptions on the table of why they think people choose us. And the reality is it's a whole different set of reasons why they choose us. So there's a lot of learning and a lot of aha moments going on as to why we need to change and why we need to readjust our organization. So, but yes, very fun and very effective too. Just to those reasons you laid out.
So you also use this as a sales tool for so when you have complex kinds of pieces, being able to use it to tell your story as a sales tool, which is great.
Yes. And let me pull up one more. Let's see if I can find it. There it is. Yes. So this was an application that we did for a client who essentially has marketing to doctors. He has a software, kind of like ClickFunnels, if your audience is a little remotely familiar with what ClickFunnels does. It helps people get leads into their software. So many of those leads become prospects. Out of those prospects, so many of those become appointments. Out of those appointments, so many consults happen. And then we close so many of those people out of the consult. And what the software does is it essentially keeps track of how many leads you're getting, how many qualified, and what the sales were. And on top of that, we'll airdrop a team in here to help with the reviews and help with other things in the business to make sure it's digitally sound. And essentially, a junior salesperson, senior salesperson can walk a prospect through this application and get a sense for the high level, broad strokes of what the software can do. And I know this firsthand because I was at a trade show presenting this, not to get doctors interested in it, just to let people know we have this service. And I had 3 or 4 doctors saying, okay, let me know what this service is. And right then and there it clicked, like, oh, a guy who doesn't really know what is going on with this can sell this. And so I put those doctors in touch with my client in terms of getting more information on the service. But in terms of like getting someone excited at a 30,000 foot view to understand, and most people, like, when you think about explaining to them what software can do for your business, it just goes right over their head. I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
Right.
But it has a way of grounding everyone in, okay, leads sliding in on slides from these different sources. You can create a metaphor that really connects with people. And so we're simplifying it so that they gain understanding quicker.
Vince, it is so fascinating to see all these pieces and the work that you have done. And I feel like we could go on and on and on forever. So one of the things that I would like to do, if people would like to have follow-up and continue to learn a little bit more, please let us know, contact us. There's information below where you can do that. And we will get in touch with Vince so that you have a way of connecting with him. Incredible service that we've used, and I know that you will also benefit from at least having some discussions with Vince. Vince, thank you so much. You are just so talented, and I have enjoyed so much your work. So thank you for what your contribution is to all of us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. And you're a wonderful person with a great business, and happy to be along with you on the journey. So thank you.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstegard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstegard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.